Hello and welcome. My name is Mickey Burdick. Today what we're going to be looking at in this video is Vectorworks 2025. I am working on it today on a Windows machine. What this video hopes to do is really just give you a basic understanding of the Vectorworks workspace. When you first open it up, there's a lot going on this screen. It's a very daunting program. There's buttons and tools everywhere, and there's 1,000 ways to do a simple thing. But I want you to be able to feel comfortable in here in this workspace and to be able to find all the things that you need. Vectorworks is a really wonderful program. If you're a student, if you're an aspiring designer, I highly recommend you go out and get it. They have a free educational license for students at Vectorworks. So go out, give it a try. It's really becoming an industry standard, and it would benefit you to understand this program or to at least have a working knowledge of how to get around in this digital space. This video today is a little bit drier than some of the others, but hopefully it'll set a good baseline vocabulary for you, and hopefully it's a video that you can come back to whenever you get lost. Vectorworks has all the tools that you need and then some. It's highly customizable, but sometimes it's hard to know where to look or even what to look for. Probably the quickest way to learn Vectorworks is to jump in and just start making stuff. So we'll want to get to that pretty quickly. And while you're watching this, I hope that you'll have the program open so that you can pause and try stuff and mess things up and sort of bounce back and forth. So with all that out of the way, here we go. This is your basic Vectorworks workspace. The layout is pretty similar to a lot of other programs. Across the top here, you have your menu, right? So under File, you have things where you can open files, set a few document preferences, things like that. Edit has a lot of the familiar things such as copy, paste, undo, redo, all the basic stuff that you'd expect to find in there. View. So View, this is where we start to get a little more specific to Vectorworks. We have a lot of different options in here having to do with rendering, projection, viewports, a lot of really specific stuff. Basically, any way that you want to look at your drawings, you'll find options for that here under View. Modify is the next tab. Modify gives you a lot of options for generally playing with two-dimensional shapes. Model is sort of the counterpart, and that deals a lot more with the 3D shapes. So Modify I generally use for 2D manipulation and Model for 3D. Spotlight. So this one, again, this is where we'll get into a lot of the industry, entertainment specific stuff, a lot of the lighting and things like that. If you're a design student, you should have the Spotlight edition of Vectorworks. If not, I will show you how to fix that in just a sec. So Tools is the next tab. There's not a ton in here that I really deal with, but you can find certain preferences at the bottom, which you may want to come back to. So if you don't have Spotlight, like I just mentioned, come on down here to Workspaces. And down here you can pick, Architect, Design Suite, Fundamentals, Landmark. You want to be on Spotlight working for, if we're talking about theatrical design at this point. Text. You can write things in Vectorworks and you can do things. You can manipulate that text. You can turn it into three-dimensional shapes and things like that. We'll go over that. Here in Window, again, I don't get into this too much other than the one you probably want to know is Palettes. So Palettes is where you can find all of your different tools and tool sets that you're going to want to be using. If you're seeing something on my screen and it's not on your screen, so maybe it looks different over here to you, that's probably just a palette setup kind of thing, and that can be addressed over here. Windows, Palettes, and then you can select whatever it is that you're not seeing. In fact, let's take a quick little side quest and talk about layout and palettes. So as you'll see, we have all these different little palettes that we can undock. We can have them floating. We can pull them over here. We can redock them, whatever it may be. And say you accidentally close one out. Now all of a sudden my attributes are gone. How do I get that back? It's as easy as coming up to Window, Palettes, and it was Attributes that I had accidentally closed. So I'll do that. And here we have Attributes right back. I can drag it over here. You'll see it'll bring up this little thing, and I can do that. Same thing too, you can adjust the sizes depending on what works for your workflow. How much of the tool sets you think you need to see, and what gives you enough room in the field here to be doing a lot of the work. When you first start up Vectorworks, you're probably going to see Resource Manager, and it's going to be floating somewhere here towards the top. And every time you hover over it, it's going to pop down and bother you. At this point, just learning how to use the program, you don't need this. So just close it out. And when we do need it, we can come up to Window, Palettes, and turn it back on. So that's Window for you. All right, after that we have Cloud. I'm not going to mess with that too much today. That gets into sharing documents and things like that. And then, of course, Help if you're having issues. They have a nice library. They have a lot of videos at Vectorworks University that you can hop on and just ask questions and get some info there. So that is your basic menu across the top. So directly below your menu, we have our View bar. The View bar has a ton of extra things on it outside of strictly views. But in general, this area will tell you how you're looking at the project and what you're working on. So here in the view portion of it, you'll see different views. So right now we're looking in top plan view, which means we're looking down at this as if it were a piece of paper. But we can switch to something like an isometric view. And we can flip through our different views right over here. Underneath that, we have our, if we are in a 3D view, such as an isometric, we have our projection, which is, you can be in perspective, you can be in orthogonal. So this, again, is just a different way to gauge how you're going to be viewing it. They also have a couple different options in there. So that's view. Right next to that, we have layers and classes. Similar to Photoshop or a lot of other programs, we work in layers here, so you can stack things up. But in Vectorworks, we also work in sheets and classes. There's another video in this series that deals exclusively with classes and layers and all that stuff. But for now, you just need to know that this is an area where you can select which class you are creating and what layer you are drawing it on. Next to that, we have visualization. So again, visualization is just how we are rendering our images as we are drafting. Right now it's in shaded. That's sort of the default, and that's where I do pretty much all of my design is in this. You can get to fancier renderings and things like that once you get to actually working with images and viewports and putting together your final package. But drafting, I usually keep it in shaded. But you can play through some of these. There's Sketch, there's Artistic Renderworks, which you can make it look like pen or pencil or whatever it may be. But by and large, I usually work in shaded. It used to be called OpenGL. If you have an old version of Vectorworks, this is OpenGL. Next to that, I'm going to skip plan rotation. But next to that, we also have our text editor. So similar to Microsoft Word or Google Docs, you can punch up text in here using your text tool, and you can edit it. You can change the size, the font, etc. And now we have snapping. Snapping is great. It will really help you with precise drawings. What that essentially does is it allows you to choose what you want to snap to. Do you want to snap to a point on this grid that you have there, snap to an object, or to a specific angle? So as I am drawing something, I want it to be perfectly straight, and you'll see it will snap to that line and draw it completely horizontal. It'll also snap up to 30 degrees, 45. It'll make things really precise. It'll also snap to endpoints so that you're connecting things perfectly in space. That snapping, if it ever gets in your way, it's easy just to pause it or turn it off right up here. Next to that, we have Zoom. I don't actually use Zoom a lot. I prefer to use a mouse. If you don't have a mouse, I really suggest that you get one for use with Vectorworks. It just makes life a lot easier. With your scroll wheel, you can zoom in and out really easily. Control plus your scroll wheel will move you up and down. Shift with your scroll wheel will move you left and right. So I try to avoid this too much. And I just use my mouse generally to zip around. Anyway, there's also some stuff below that. This is your quick preferences area. You can play with different settings, but again, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds today as to what all of this various stuff does. As you start working with Vectorworks, you'll know a little bit more about your own workflow and style and what does or doesn't suit your work. So I wouldn't worry about this too much. But again, if you're seeing something on my screen that you're not seeing, a lot of that can be looked at up here in quick preferences. So you can turn the grid on or off. You can make the page boundaries there. You can go into dark mode. Whatever it may be, all of those little preferences are going to be over here. Below that, you will see tabs, so you can have multiple files open, and you can flip from one file to another, and you can copy things from one file to another. And that's about it for the view bar up here. Okay, so let's get into some of the fun stuff now. Tools. Over here on the left, you will see your basic tool palette. I'm not going to get into all the different tools. In video 3, we'll start getting into some of this and actually start drawing stuff. Just know that up here you have all your different tools. For example, we have our rectangle tool. With 2 clicks, you can create a rectangle. You set one point, pull it out, set another point. Same thing, we have a circle. You can pull it out this way, and draw your circles. Also, too, I think it's important to note that not all of these tools are simply for making shapes, but they're also for manipulating shapes. For example, we have like a mirror tool. So if you have something selected, you can go ahead and strike a line, and it will mirror that object and duplicate it. The selection tool, right here, this little arrow, that's probably the most important one because you need to be able to select things. You can select objects with this. The tools that you're going to be using a lot, such as selection tool, I think it's worth learning the hotkeys for. As you hover over any of these tools, it'll bring up a little description of what that does, and it will also give you a hotkey. You'll see on the selection tool that is X. So say I'm in here drawing rectangles. If you want to jump real quickly, instead of bouncing all the way back over here and selecting it, as you're drawing, you can simply hit X. And now I'm in my selection tool, and I can jump right into modifying this. I think it's also important to note that when you bring up pretty much any tool, your toolbar up here is going to show different modes. That means you can use this tool in various different ways. So, for example, let's look at our rectangle again. Let's say I have the rectangle selected. I want to draw just like that, 2 points. So if you look up here, here are the different ways we can draw rectangles. Corner to corner, center to corner, midpoint to corner, or 3-point. So with 3 points selected, I draw 1, 2, and then I can strike it up this way. So pretty much every tool you have is going to have different modes. Again, with circle, you can strike it by the diameter. You can start with the center point and then define the radius. There are a ton of different ways to do that, but all of these tools are going to have different modes and things you can do. Double line tool will draw 2 lines for you, like that, in parallel. But you can change how far the distance is between them. Say you want that to be 2 foot. And then the next one you draw is going to be much wider. So this is an important thing to play with. If a tool's not behaving the way you'd like it to, you can usually come up here and change the mode or play with the settings. Moving below that, under our basic tool set, we can start to take a look at attributes. Let me clean some of this up real quick. Selection tool. Select and delete. You can also hold Shift as you are selecting, and that will select multiple things. Then just tap delete. So attributes. Every shape that we draw has different attributes. For example, this has a black line around a white fill. You can easily modify and make your drawings pretty specific. It gets even fancier once you get into three-dimensional modeling with textures and things like that. But this is where you can modify all of those things. So once you have something selected, you can change it. Right now it's solid, but we want to change the color to orange. And the pen, the outline here, instead of being black, we want it to be a really thick green color, let's say. So we can change the color there, and we can change the line thickness as well. So you can modify things over here in the attributes. You can do dashed lines, you can do hatches, you can do gradients. All that different stuff can be found over here. Moving below attributes, we'll see here that we have other tool sets. And you can change how much of this you are or are not seeing by dragging. But down here, these are all different tool sets. So this one, for example, is event design. This has things like curtains, stairs. You'll use this a lot for soft goods. Then we also have spotlight, so you can add certain lighting instruments, things like that. Trusses, rigging. The one you're going to use a lot is probably this 3D modeling one. And in here you can get in and start to manipulate other 3D objects. For example, this push-pull tool. I love that. You can pull things in and out, shrink things down. Control Z to undo, or you can undo up here as well. But this has a lot of really cool tools to get in and start playing with. So we don't use these quite as often, but once we get into 3D modeling, you'll be in this one probably quite a bit. This is new in 2025. This is called the on-screen view control. And what this allows us to do is, if you're in any view, it shows you basically how you're looking at this. You can grab this block, and as you start twisting it, it will twist your world, your drawing, accordingly. So it's kind of a fun way to get in and move through the work. You know, I've gotten pretty accustomed to using just my mouse and my flyover tool, so I don't need this a lot. You can turn that off if it's getting in your way. Right here, when you hover down, it'll appear, and you can just uncheck that. If you want to bring it back, if you're looking at your screen and you don't have that, hover down around here, and this should pop up. It's kind of ghosted, and you can turn that on. Moving across to the right-hand side of the page, over here is our object info palette. So again, every object that we draw has attributes, and there is information about those objects over here in the object info. So for example, this rectangle I just drew, once it's selected, you'll know it's selected by the orange around it, you can come over here and it'll tell you the width and the height of this object. It'll tell you the area, the perimeter, things like that. You can actually also change objects from over here. So instead of 12 foot by 6 foot 11, I want this to be 8 foot by 8 foot square. I can just type it in there, and our object takes on those attributes. It can also tell you where it is on the page. Currently, it is set to these coordinates on the page. So if we want to center it at 0, 0 on our page, we can simply type in 0, 0, and now it is centered on the page. If you want to set another corner to 0, 0, you just select that corner, 0, 0. And that corner is now dead in the center of the page. So that's object info. You'll see up here too, there's other different tabs. We'll get to some of this for rendering and data, but for right now, mostly we're concerned about shape. That's really the one thing you need to know. Moving below our object info, we have our navigation pane. This is where you can flip through between classes and layers and sheets. There's a lot to go into here, and that's a really big subject. But for now, just know that this is where your navigation pane is. Once you get into some other types of files, here's another demo, you'll see that you can separate things by large groups. So for example, I can turn the building off. I can turn off the stage shell and just see the set. I can turn off lighting, or you can turn these all back on. So that's kind of how layers work. Classes, similarly. I can go ahead and turn off, my trim work if I want to just see certain walls, things like that. So that's classes and layers. All you need to know at this point is that this is where it's located. And that's about it for the workspace. Just as a quick review, remember up here you have your main menu. This is where you open files and you can do a lot of your 2D and 3D manipulation in here. Below that we have our view bar. Below that on the left we have our basic tool set. This is where all of your most important beginning tools are going to be located. So selection tool, that's going to be a big one. That's all up in here. Attributes directly below that, understanding that all the shapes have attributes and you can define those. Tool sets underneath that. So you have in here was where you find all the fun 3D stuff, different kinds of fasteners, really small technical gizmos. They have all that different stuff in here, curtains, things like that. On the top right, again, object info, where you can find out anything and everything. And then below that we have navigation, where you can bounce between classes, sheets, layers, saved views, all that kind of stuff. All right, thanks very much. I appreciate you watching. Bye-bye.